Hey guys, we're going to be doing something a little different about the next 2 months. For the next couple months, we're going to be answering some of your questions that you commonly ask us through our social media outlets. Men in the Arena Army, we salute you. Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the Men in the Arena podcast, guiding you through the stress bubble of life to your best version. I'm Jim Ramos, your host and guide of today's #1 podcast on Spotify for Christian men. Welcome to the show. As you know, we unapologetically target men, yet we have a massive audience of women who are passionate about getting inside the minds and the hearts of their men. So we'll be answering questions that some of you women have asked. And so I want to stop right now and say to the women in our army, we salute you. Thank you for being so passionate about your man. Hey, also, we have a video right now on social media that just hit 5 million views, and it's about making your wife your home screen and your lock screen. And nobody's asked me this, nobody's called me out, but I just want to show you, this is my home screen right there. That is my home screen. It changes often. It's always the same woman, different picture. So that's my favorite picture of Shanna right now. It's our 30th anniversary trip. That picture was taken from the island of Crete last September. So I'm missing Greece right now. The question is from a younger guy, super smart young man. He's saying, how do you know when you've been called into ministry? And so for me, I was called 2 specific times. The first time I was not living for the Lord. I was a brand new Christian. I was not involved in the local church. I was not involved in anything spiritual, but I had an experience with a knee surgery that went bad where I was blind for 3 days and in ICU. And in ICU, blind for 3 days, God spoke to me. So it was a pretty radical call to ministry, and that just changed my whole life. I still did not give my life to Christ for another 2 years, but it changed, it altered how I did life. The most recent time was in 2010 or 11 when God called me to start working with men. That was a more subtle call to ministry. And what you're asking is, how do you hear the voice of God calling you subtly into full-time vocational ministry? That's what I'm thinking, that you're talking about full-time vocational ministry. I think it's really important, first of all, to understand your shape, your spiritual shape. This is something that Rick Warren came up with in his book, The Purpose-Driven Life. It's an acrostic, five-word acrostic for spiritual gifts. What are your spiritual gifts? So I would say, first of all, what you need to do, you need to find a spiritual gifts test that your church offers, or you can find it online. Find out what your top 3 spiritual gifts are and be able to call them out by name for the rest of your life. Leadership, teaching, and exhortation are mine. So what are your spiritual gifts? The next one is the letter H. What is your heart or passion? So my calling got changed in 2010-11 because God literally changed my passion from working with students to working with men. And so to me, passion is a massive, massive tool that God uses when he calls us into ministry. So we have spiritual gifts, H, heart or passion, spiritual gifts, S, heart or passion, H, and then A is, what are your abilities or learned skills? I spoke with a man who is an NFL quarterback, and he won a Super Bowl as an NFL quarterback. And he was doing a keynote message in Tehachapi, California, telling us his Super Bowl, exploits. And he said, you know what? And before that, he was a professional baseball player. He said, you know what? God gives men a lot of abilities. I can throw things far. And I just thought, man, that's pathetic. That's all you can do is throw things far. But he's got a Super Bowl ring as big as my head on there. And that's a big ring. So what has God naturally given you the ability to do? The next letter is the letter P. What is your personality, or what is your temperament? I love Florence Littauer's material called Personality Plus. Enneagram is really popular today. Some use Myers-Briggs, some use Briggs and Stratton. No, I'm just kidding. There are many, many personality tests out there. Find out where you fit. And are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? Find out who you are as far as how God made your temperament. And then the last one is the letter E, experiences. God never wastes a hurt. God loves to take our mess and turn it into his message. He loves to take our tragedies and turn them into his trophies. Romans 8:28 says, for God works all things out for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. So I take those 5 things, my spiritual gifts, my heart or passion, my abilities or talents, personality or temperament, and my experiences. I put those together, and that equates to the hand that I will deal to the world. So God has dealt me a hand, spiritual gifts, heart, abilities, personality, experiences, and now from that I deal my hand to the world. So that is how I recognize my call to ministry. So to go back to your question, if you are a married man, you need to weigh the calling of God against your spouse. What does your spouse say? Ministry is I have a massive amount of men that I have worked with in the past, far more than are not, that got called into ministry, went into full ministry, lasted 5-10 years, and are out of ministry completely. So for me, I question the call. The call of God is objective. It is not subjective. It is a call of God where God is objectively calling you to ministry. So you have to decide, is God calling me specifically to full-time ministry? If he is not, if it's subjective, then I would argue that may not be a call. An objective call of God, you cannot deviate from that. When you say yes to God. I have never considered leaving full-time ministry. I've been in vocational ministry since 1990. I have never allowed a person who has hurt me or have offended me to lead me away from full-time ministry. I have never allowed a church that might have wounded me to, or might not have, to lead me away from full-time ministry. I have seen full-time vocational ministry as a objective call of God. And it is something I cannot deviate from without being undeniably disobedient to God. So that is important. And I think so many people are called to ministry, but something goes bad and they're gone. And I wonder if that is really the case for a person. Did they really get called into full-time ministry? If they did, then they're being disobedient to God. So I know that there are times when God legitimately brings you into full-time ministry for a season and legitimately brings you out. The problem in human experiences is that's not what I've experienced. People move into full-time ministry because they're called of God, and they leave because they're hurt by somebody. And it's not God at all who led them out. So you need to be very careful when you discern that God has called you to full-time ministry, that is an objectively undeniable call. You will historically make less money, less income than those who are not called of ministry. You will deal with a lot more people problems from those who are not called to ministry. The call to ministry is really a call to a sacrificial life. I make probably 5 figures less than a lot of my peers from college. 5 figures less than. Like they're making double of what I'm making. We rented a house for many, many years. We deal with people problems. We deal with people who you live in a glass house. So the call to full-time ministry, it needs to be something that is objectively undeniable for you. I hope that answers your question. So the question is, why do you make videos that appear that you have buried a body in the woods and you're running from the cops? Well, the answer is because I am. I've got numerous bodies in the woods that have been, but you don't bury them. You got to burn them first so there's no DNA. No, I'm just kidding. Are you kidding me? Oh my gosh. I had somebody ask me, are you going to Mordor? Are you a hobbit? I'm like, well, if you saw my feet, you might think I was a hobbit. But no, the reason why I'm walking in the woods, you guys, is first of all, I believe that men resonate more with a wilderness type of experience. Our target audience seems to be guys that like the outdoors, so that's why I do that. But realistically, the other reason why I do that, you guys, is I interact with God in the outdoors, and God meets me in the wilderness. The wilderness is a place I will go to experience silence and solitude. I don't go to the outdoors to talk to God. I go to the outdoors to just in silence put myself in a space where he can actually interact with me. I just got back from a 5-day deer hunting trip in Hawaii, and all we did was sit in a tree stand or lay down flat on the ground on my stomach waiting for a deer to pop out. So I spent hours and hours and hours each day alone, immovable, and waiting. And so in those moments, God can minister to me. And so I think for me personally, the wilderness is where I go to experience that. And people can't find the bodies. Also, men, for you, this is your ministry. God has called you to be the hero in your story. We are just the guides, nothing more. God has placed you in your story to be the hero, and so he's asked you to do it. So if you have questions that you would like answered, please ask us. We try to get to them all.